Are you tired of advertisements? You can listen to this episode and more ad-free for only $1 a month by supporting the show on Patreon. Visit monstersamonguspodcast.com and hit the Patreon tab for more details. Good evening and welcome to Monsters Among Us. I'm your guide, Derek Hayes. Now folks, it's a downright pleasure to provide the spooks for you here this evening. So thank you for joining me. I have a wicked little episode in store for you this evening. Violent entities, strange lights in the sky, a creature that kept pace with an unsuspecting hiker, and so much more. So if you're looking to get yourself thoroughly creeped out this evening, you came to the right place. And if you're looking to start immediately, you also came to the right place, because there is no unnecessary banter or small talk on this program. We get right to the action. Andrea, welcome to tonight's show.
Hi, my name's Andrea. This story is based in Chicago, Illinois, a little bit more on the southwest side of the outskirts of the city, really about to meet the suburbs, and we became listeners not too long ago, and I absolutely love your show. But anyway, this started a couple years back, I believe in 2012. I was 12 at the time, and it was actually a summer day. Skies were pretty cloudy, kind of like how they are today, sparse, but cloudy enough that you can see the clouds, but it's still sunny out. And it was actually outside with my brother, my younger brother at the time, who was, I believe, 8 years old with me. We were out on the trampoline just playing, and I don't know why, we just decided to look up. We were just looking up at the sky, kind of, looking at the clouds, trying to see what shapes we can make out of the clouds at the time. When I kind of noticed there was just two really bright headlights, and honestly, the only way that I can kind of explain how I saw them was just like car headlights. They had that yellow hue to them, kind of like when you're driving at night and you see the headlights, they were super bright. And I mean, it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because I just remember the sun being high, beaming on us, but we were outside being kids playing on the trampoline. What I thought was weird, though, is that I could almost see the outline of this shape, and realistically, 12-year-old me, I was just, in shock of looking up in the sky and seeing something up there, especially with two bright headlights. At first, I'm telling my little brother at the time, oh my gosh, what is that? What is that? Is it an airplane? What is it? Could it be a satellite? Because I know, I wasn't the smartest kid at the younger age, but, I was on embryonal. I kind of had an idea of, maybe it's a satellite or something like that. But what really threw me off was when I was looking at it at first, it was just against the clear blue sky. You can kind of see the outline shape of it, and it really was just more of a round craft. I don't really know exactly what it was. After a while, those bright lights that I saw in the day clear sky, you just saw them slowly dim out. It wasn't an automatically turn off. It was just kind of like a fade out type of feel to it. They just faded out, really. After that, we just kind of tried keeping track of it based on its outline. That outline, you could actually follow it into the clouds and everything. And we stayed looking at it for a good 5 minutes, honestly. We just kind of tracked it around because it wasn't moving super erratically. It wasn't going back and forth, side to side or anything. It was just kind of hovering in between that area of the sky that we saw, kind of going up, a little bit down, almost drifting, just kind of drifted from area to area, in the general vicinity that it was in. After a while, it slowly kind of hid behind a cloud. We saw it peek out again. Like I said, it wasn't really a solid figure. All that we saw was just the outline of it, so to speak. It almost seemed like in the Marvel movies, you know how like the helicarrier, that airplane, so to speak, they have, it kind of becomes translucent, but you could see the shape of it. That's kind of what we saw. But after a while, it just kind of ducked into the clouds and just really disappeared. And I'm not sure what you can make of this or if any other listeners can make of this, but I just thought it was very weird considering we're in a very heavily populated area. I've always thought back to it and just tried to think of what it really could be there or what it was. And, you know, the older I got, the more I thought about it, and it's just like, it wasn't a satellite. It didn't look like a satellite. And the fact that it had two bright beams that low to us so we could see it. And like I said, it wasn't necessarily like it wasn't in the tree lines. It was up in the sky. Like, I wouldn't say an airplane's altitude, but high enough that it was just a little too low to be a satellite, too low to be an airplane. I don't know if it was a drone. Like I said, it was clear. I could see through it, but all I could see was the outline. Yeah, that's my story. Let me know what you think of it. I'll be very happy to hear from you or anything, or just what the members have to say. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Andrea. Now, I've seen those headlights in the sky. It was probably 1992 or 3. I was a bench warmer on our JV football team. We were playing an away game. We were playing a rival school, the next county over. And I spent half the game staring at the nighttime sky. Something I always did and frankly still do. And on this particular night, I was rewarded because I saw what looked like a set of car headlights cruising a few thousand feet above me, dipping in and out of the clouds. Now, I pointed it out to a few of the other guys riding the bench, but there didn't seem to be much interest. And in hindsight, I suppose they were probably right to brush me off, because now I'm pretty sure those were just part of the landing lights of a small aircraft. Maybe a Cessna Citation or something like that, landing in Columbus, which was only 30 or so miles from this ball field. But that's not to say that what Andrea saw could be so easily explained. Now, based on her description, I'm quick to think of cloaking technology, and we've discussed that concept on countless previous episodes, but mostly in respect to the Glimmerman phenomena. You know, the humanoid shape people are comparing to the Predator creature from the film series. But it almost seems like Andrea is assigning those attributes to some sort of flying or hovering craft. And obviously, it wouldn't be the first time we've heard about this sort of thing, though I can't exactly pinpoint the last time we discussed it. But with each of these cloaked UFO stories or Glimmerman accounts that I hear, I'm thinking more and more that our very own government is more responsible than our little green men. For example, this is the known technology that the military is currently using. So just imagine what they've developed and haven't yet shared with us. Now, this clip on behalf of Strange Evidence on the Science Channel.
The U.S. military has invested in actual cloaking technology, which would render an aircraft essentially invisible.
Scientists have been experimenting with cloaking technology in which light bends around a unique reflective shield, concealing the object behind it.
Scientists have developed a sort of invisibility skin made of gold. Basically, what it does is refracts the light in a way that renders this object invisible to a human observer.
The U.S. military could be testing highly dangerous aircraft in areas that are highly populated across the United States.
Now, we're going to explore this topic just a little further on tonight's Beyond. So if this has piqued your interest, be sure to stick around to the end of the show to hear how you can join us in the Beyond. And we thank you, Andrea, for taking time to share your entry and for allowing us to explore this nearly invisible phenomena. Listen, if you've ever tried to break a bad habit, you know it's harder than catching a non-blurry photo of Bigfoot. But that's where tonight's sponsor, Fume, comes in. Fume is an award-winning flavor air device. Flavored air is quickly becoming the leading alternate to vaping and smoking. It's a whole new movement toward better habits, and Fume is the leader in this new category. When I first heard about fume, I couldn't wait to try it. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I've been really enjoying the flavors. My favorite right now is crisp mint. The look of the device itself is pretty cool. It's made with real wood, and the sleek shape looks impressive. And fume is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, so it also gives my fingers something to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety. I use mine all the time while I'm in the studio, and believe it or not, it helps me from snacking too much. Fume continuously invests in third-party studies to ensure the safety of its products, so you can rest easy knowing you have something safe to reach for that can fill the void after you ditch your bad habit. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, use my code MONSTERS to get a free gift with your journey pack. Head to tryfume.com/monsters. That's tryfum.com/monsters and use code MONSTERS to get a free gift with your order today.
Men had a monopoly on.
Okay, kids, I have no doubt you will think of this next entry the next time you glance into a mirror. From the state of Utah, please welcome Michael to the program.
My name is Michael Singleton. I'm from Logan, Utah. This story happened in 2003 when I was attending college in Salt Lake City. We lived in a dorm room, and they had a big long hallway. The hallway was directly across from the bathroom mirror, so you could look into the mirror and see the hallway. One night while getting ready for bed, I went to look into the mirror. When I looked into the mirror, I saw a face peek around the corner and disappear. I took a step back and thought, whoa, that was weird. My roommates I told, and well, they didn't believe me. Anyways, love the podcast. I'm a big fan. Thanks, and keep it spooky.
Thank you, Michael. Now, when I was younger, I'd heard somewhere that aliens came from inside mirrors to abduct people sleeping in their bedrooms. It was probably unsolved mysteries, I imagine. But whatever it was, it terrified me. I was an adult before I could finally stomach having a mirror in my own bedroom. And I bet there are more macabre mirror stories out there, just waiting to be told. So if that's you or you have any other true supernatural or paranormal story, call our 24-hour hotline at 888-608-NIGHT. That's 888-608-NIGHT. Or record a story on your cell phone and email it to me at monstersamonguspodcast@gmail.com. Now, what do you say we explore a topic we don't get to discuss as often as we probably should? After all, if the claims are true, this topic could eventually affect each and every one of us. Because we all have to die sometime. Please welcome this anonymous caller from parts unknown.
Hi there. I just wanted to call with a quick little story that I have. I'm a fairly new listener, and I'm catching up at the moment. And I recently got to the couple episodes where you had said that they made you stop for the night because you just couldn't deal with it. And it reminded me of something that my mother told me happened whenever I was about 3 years old. I guess I was very curious about death and dying and stuff like that, which is kind of a weird thing for a 3-year-old to be interested in, but I guess I asked her questions about it a lot. And one night we were laying in bed, and she finally, was getting a little fed up with it, I guess, because, why is my 3-year-old talking to me about such a morbid topic? And she was like, something to the extent of, why are you talking about death so much? Why do you have all these questions? Why are you so interested in such a scary thing? And she says that I looked her dead in the eyes and just said, what's so scary about it, Mommy? We get to do it over and over again. And she says that after that, she pretty much just laid down and let my dad take care of me for the rest of the night, and she cried. Yeah, so that was a pretty interesting story that she shared with me whenever I was a little bit older, about in high school. So I just figured I'd share that with you and I guess see what anyone else thinks about it. I personally believe in reincarnation, and I think I even believed in it back when I was 3. Love the show. Bye.
Thank you, caller. Now, I've known a few kids that would say weird things like that, but everyone around us always just said that they had an old soul. I guess they never said exactly how old. It is a comforting thought, though. Reincarnation. The idea that we could be placed back here for a brand new try. But you know, the more I think about it, the more I hope that it doesn't work chronologically. Because the future these days doesn't exactly look promising. Might just be simpler to stay dead. Thank you again, caller, for bridging a topic we seldom highlight here on the program. I'll see what I can do to bring it closer to the forefront. Now let's do one more story before we break to pay a couple bills. And by the way, a big thanks to everyone that does support our advertisers, because that keeps them coming back and allows us to continue to grow and push the show forward. So thank you for the support. Now for that telephone call. Coming to us from Washington State, please welcome Jeff to the program.
Hi, Derek. This is Jeff in Washington. Back in about 2001, I was a student down in Southern California in Culver City, and I was living in an apartment, like a single studio apartment over top of a garage in a neighborhood down there, and I was not drunk or on any drugs, and I went to sleep that night, and in the middle of the night, I was awoken by what felt like something smacking me in the face, like punching me in the face or just hitting me in the face. And I woke up out of my sleep. I was sleeping on my back, face up. And I woke up and thought for sure I'd been dreaming. And so I tried to go back to sleep. And as I was falling back asleep, it happened again. And I'm pretty certain it was not a dream. It felt very real. And the room was very dark. I sat up, bolted upright in my bed, sat up, and I yelled. It felt as though there was something in the top corner of the room on the ceiling. Like there was a presence. I don't know why, but I just felt for sure that there was something in the room up in the corner that it had swooped down or something. And it was, once I got up, sat up in bed, it went up to the corner of the room on the ceiling, and I yelled at it. I think I just said something like, "Hey," really loud. And strangely, I felt like it left. And I basically laid back down, sat there for a while, laid there for a while, and felt like it was okay, and I went back to sleep. That was the only real encounter I've had with something paranormal. I remember at some point later reading, I've studied and been interested in East Asian culture for most of my life. I was in my mid-20s when this happened. I'm in my mid-40s now. But I've studied East Asian culture and spirituality even to some extent, for most of my life. And one of the things I came across after that happened was a reference in a spiritual text, an ancient text, like more than at least 500 or 1,000 years old. A text that talked about how when you sleep at night, you are more vulnerable to, quote, evil spirits, that sort of thing, if you sleep face up. Something about the front of your body being exposed and your face being exposed like that, face up, makes you more vulnerable to negative energy or negative spirits. I thought that was really interesting, and I thought I would pass that along to you all, and maybe it will help somebody at some point. Anyway, thanks again, Derek. Love the show. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Jeff. That's a first, getting punched in the face by an unseen force. And speaking of unseen forces, This story took place in Culver City, California, home of the infamous Sony Pictures lot. Now, I actually lived just down the road in the Mid-City area for nearly a decade, so I'm very familiar with this area. I'm also familiar with the notorious haunting from Culver City that you should probably have on your radar. And trust me when I say this one is not for the faint of heart. The Dorsbither haunting, also known as the Entity Case, is a paranormal incident that allegedly occurred in Culver City, California in the 1970s. Doris claimed to have been repeatedly attacked and sexually assaulted by unseen entities in her home. The events were investigated by paranormal researchers Barry Taff and Carrie Gaynor, who documented strange phenomena such as levitation and physical assaults. The case gained widespread attention after being adapted into a book and later a movie entitled The Entity. And I actually dug up an old interview with one of the men that investigated this violent haunting, Carrie Gaynor. And this is what he had to say when he was interviewed by the Sightings production team back in 1992.
When I went over to her house, we conducted about a 2-hour interview, and during that time she told us a lot of interesting experiences, but I knew she was holding something back. And at the end of the interview, she finally admitted to us that she was attacked and raped by the ghost. At that time, we thought she was probably crazy.
Gaynor still had trouble convincing his colleagues at UCLA that he was on to something significant.
Initially, they would say, well, you're hallucinating. So then I would look at them and say, well, we've got 20 witnesses. And they would say, well, then it's obviously mass hallucination.
Gaynor returned to the house a number of times, bringing more witnesses with him, and the eerie phenomenon became even more pronounced.
We started seeing balls of light lighting up the walls, and everybody in the room would see this. And the lights would get bigger and bigger and brighter and brighter. And at some point, I finally started talking to it. And I said, well, if you're really here, come off the wall. Because what I was concerned was that somebody in the room was faking it, and they were projecting the light onto the wall. Well, when I asked that question, the light lifted off the wall, floated into the middle of our room, started spinning and twisting and expanding in different directions simultaneously. It had full parallax. We could see it from all sides, and I had 9 professional photographers set up in the room that were shooting it from all sides.
Now, fans of John Mulaney's new Netflix show, Everybody's in LA, might recognize Carrie Gaynor from the paranormal episode of that show. I was sort of shocked to see him on that program last night, having just researched his involvement in the Entity Case just a day prior. What a coincidence. Now I have, of course, linked to the full sighting segment featuring this haunting. They display a few of the Polaroids and share a few more details worth checking out for the nostalgia alone. And I've also included a link to the trailer to the 1982 film based on the story, conveniently titled The Entity. So now, thanks to a segue from Jeff and that background from the Sightings television show, you too might think of this place each and every time you hear of Culver City, California. Either this or the haunted Munchkin Hotel. But that's a story for another time. Thank you again, Jeff, for allowing me to share this horrifying tale.
The night into the classic walk has its founding.
So you've probably heard about microdosing. You know that feeling when your mind and body are relaxed and peaceful, like after a good workout or a long hot shower. Well, microdose gummies can help you get into that chill zone. They help me fall asleep faster and calm my anxiety, and they help me tap into my creative flow when I'm feeling blocked. Microdose gummies deliver the perfect entry-level dose of THC that help you feel just the right amount of good. To be clear, I'm not talking about getting high. I'm talking about the sweet spot between CBD and THC that gives you the benefits of both. And my favorite time to take them is at the end of a long day, when I'm ready to wind down and chill out for the night. They help me get ready for bed and calm my mind so I can fall asleep more easily and keep the sleep paralysis demons away. So what are you waiting for? Get 30% off your first order plus free shipping today at microdose.com with promo code Monsters Among Us. It's available nationwide. That's microdose.com, promo code Monsters Among Us for 30% off and free shipping. Microdose.com, promo code Monsters Among Us. As always, supporting our sponsors supports the show. So thank you for listening. Now back to that doppelganger you swear is your brother-in-law.
Breaking the law? No surprise.
Now this next one gives the monster in the woods motif a little bit of attention. Richard from Oregon. Welcome to the program.
Hey Derek, so long-time listener, first-time caller, and I want to call up and just share a story that happened to me when I was very young. Well, not real young, but I was around 15 years old in the Ouachita Mountains. I think you might actually pronounce them Ouachita Mountains in Oklahoma, on the Oklahoma-Arkansas border. And it involves, I possibly think it was a Bigfoot. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but that's sort of my biggest guess. So, parents, I grew up actually in southeast Kansas, and my parents, for a vacation, they had decided that they were going to take a trip, kind of like in a southern loop through Oklahoma and through Texas into Louisiana, and then back up through Arkansas and into Missouri and back home. So we were pretty familiar with Missouri and Arkansas and Oklahoma too, but you know, it was kind of fun. It was going to be a camping trip, and we had a pop-up camper. My parents had pop-up campers, so they were really looking forward to it. And so we were on our trip, and we happened to stop. We were in the Ouachita Mountains, and I can't exactly pinpoint the exact area we were at, but we actually stopped. There was actually like a lake very close to us where we stopped, and my parents had decided this looks like a great place to make camp, and they were starting to set up everything up, and I was just a 15-year-old kid, and you know, I had mixed feelings about going on the trip. I thought it was kind of fun, but I was also felt a little cooped up, and I always wanted to be in the woods kind of exploring and stuff. And I decided to go up. There was a mountain trail that, and these are, you know, they're actually considered part of the Ozark Mountains, and they were going pretty far up the trail. I could see it, and so I decided, well, I'd just go up there, and I didn't tell anybody really where I went. And all I had on me was this kind of like a little Bowie knife that I had strapped on me, no flashlight or anything like that. So, and it was probably around 7 o'clock because it got dark around 9 o'clock or so. So I was going up. I kept climbing up, and I noticed that there at one point, it was a really cool trail. There was nobody else on the trail at all, and it was really cool. And I was just taking it in, and thought I was really, because I was on by myself. I thought I was some sort of explorer or something. And I was walking up, and about halfway on the trail, probably halfway up, I noticed that there was like a fire. It must have been, at the time I didn't know what it was. I thought it was like an old creek bed or something. But it probably was a fire cut somebody had made for a forest fire. I had to go across that, and it was pretty wide. I couldn't jump across it, and it was pretty wide, so I had to climb down and go back up. So then I did that, and came back up on the trail and kept going, and I kept thinking to myself, like looking around thinking, it's going to get dark pretty quick here. I wonder how much further I have to go, and I better be careful if I go back in the dark, because I might run into this thing. I might, fall off into this thing. So I just kept going, and finally I reached the very top, kind of where the trail sort of stopped, or close to the top of the mountain there. And I looked, and what was one of the weirder things, there was a cave, and I could see this cave, and there were these like, I guess they were mountain lion cubs. I'm not really sure what they were. They looked like small kittens, and I wasn't close enough. I wasn't getting closer. Kind of got freaked out. I thought, are those mountain lions, or what are those bobcats? What are they? Anyway, so I thought I better turn around, and it was getting really dark, and I decided to hightail it and start going down. And as I'm going down the mountain, I look to my right, and the sun's coming down I can see the sun sort of coming down on my left. And I look to my right, and I see looks like a shadow, kind of. I looked at it, because it was actually kind of keeping pace with me. Like, it looked like my shadow, because I looked, so I thought, okay, it must be my shadow. And it was probably about, I'd say it's about 30 yards or so away. I kind of looked at it a few times, and it just seemed odd. And just get like a creepy feeling, like it just didn't seem right or something. But I just assumed, well, I'm 15 years old, what I know. I think it's a shadow. So I'm walking down, I keep kind of glancing over, and then I notice that it's sort of, it's keeping up with my movements. And then at one point, I just stop suddenly, and all of a sudden, I hear like on my right hand side where this shadow I hear this sort of like the leaves rustling and some branches, And in other words, so it, when I stopped, it actually stopped a few seconds after I did. And I look over and I realize all of a sudden that this thing is not my shadow. I mean, it was probably about 5-6 feet or so, like close to my height. I could tell it wasn't huge or anything, but it was off a little, further enough distance you couldn't quite get a clear make on it. And I just thought, that's not my shadow, like something's crazy here. So I thought, I got to get out of here. So I just started running as fast as I could. And I was pretty quick, I did some track stuff and I was pretty quick. And I can run pretty fast, and I just had jeans on, I remember that, so it was a little hard to run. It was hot, it was in the summer, but I was, trying to get down the mountain, and I kept thinking to myself, that culvert, that fire cut's going to come up, and I've got to be careful, because it's getting dark. And as I started running down the hill, I could hear the thing, whatever it was now, had gotten back off, and it just came back on the path, and it was running through the woods. I didn't dare even turn around to look. I could just hear it behind me. And I thought if I turned around, it was going to result in me being caught. So I just kept running as fast as I could. And I could hear it behind me, it was gaining ground. And finally I got to the culvert and I jumped down into it and came back up the other side and jumped going, and I just kept braking, and it still stayed behind me for a while, like it's tried to catch up to me. And I think, I finally I still had about maybe 100 yards to go back down the mountain. It felt like it finally had stopped. Because as you came back down on the trail, it came out in this campground area. So it's kind of stopped on the road. And I felt like it wasn't behind me anymore. And, I think about it now. I mean, of course, I have no idea exactly what it was. It was just really a freaky experience. I told my parents about it, and they were just like, kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. They didn't quite know what to think. Pretty incredulous. But, I think about it now, and I think, well, what if it was a Bigfoot, it wasn't quite as huge as a Bigfoot like you sort of see. But I thought if it was a juvenile, even if it's a juvenile Bigfoot, that's the only thing I could really equate it to, what it was. It could have easily have caught me, but it didn't. Well, anyway, I didn't know, but later, as I found out, and later on the vacation even, afterwards, I found out that there are actually a lot of reported sightings in the Ouachita Forest of Sasquatch. And so for a long time, that's been reported. And they even have festivals in some of the towns around there. And I know the Folk, Arkansas had the Boggy Creek legend about the monster there. So I don't know. I don't know what I saw, but to this day, I remember it as if it was a terrifying experience. And like I said, if it really wanted to catch me, it probably could have caught me. So it must have not really wanted to hurt me, as maybe it was playing a game more with me, kind of aping my movements, and then it ran. When I ran, it started chasing me, so I don't know. But I just wanted to share that with you. Love your show, Derek, and thanks so much. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Richard. I'll tell you what. Finding a litter of kits, bobcat or cougar, in the wild is probably more rare than seeing a Sasquatch itself. And to see Sasquatch as well, it sounds like 15-year-old Richard should have been playing the lottery. And I can't tell you for sure what he saw that day, but I can tell you that I'm extremely jealous of both experiences. So we thank you again, Richard, for sharing that entry. It's a great reminder to get outside a little more often. Now, folks, don't forget about our merchandise shop, monstersamonguspodcast.com. Then click the shop tab. And we have a new item alert, a brand new t-shirt design. Now, recently, we partnered with friend and talented artist Jonathan Dodd for an exciting new t-shirt design, now available in the shop. The new Bigfoot Campfire t-shirt features yours truly, telling spooky stories by the campfire, with Sasquatch lurking behind me. It's an awesome outdoorsy design, just in time for summer nights by the campfire. So go check it out in the MAU shop and on our social media pages. Again, that's monstersamonguspodcast.com and click the shop tab. And thank you again, Jonathan Dodd, for bringing this awesome design to life. And just as a side note, if you watched our film Shadows in the Desert, High Strangeness in the Borrego Triangle, Jonathan is the artist responsible for not only the film's poster, but all of the art you see in the movie. So make sure you check out his work and give him a follow on Instagram at JonathanDodd_draws. That's Dodd with 3 Ds. Or I'll put a link up in the show notes. Now on to another story. This one about contact from the other side. Please welcome Mac from Illinois.
Hey Derek, this is Mac from Illinois. I'm a repeat offender. Over the weekend, my former boss passed away. He was about 84 years old. Monday was the visitation. Our secretary, who worked with him the longest, she went to that visitation. Now, this is coming straight from the wife of our former boss. While the family was waiting in a side room for the visitation, the granddaughter and the grandson did all the detailing. Well, while they were sitting there, the grandson receives a phone call. The granddaughter gets upset, tells him to take it outside. Well, but then the grandson looks at the phone. The phone call is coming straight from the phone of our former boss, their grandfather. So he rushes up to where they have the body, and what he finds is a couple of the attendants. They're doing some last-minute preparations on the body. Well, buried with him, as they were going to do, was they were going to put some of the stuff that he was known to have had. He was a smoker, so he was going to have a pack of cigarettes, probably the lighter, and a few other things. Well, somehow the phone also ended up inside the clothing. So the grandson says, whoa, you need to stop. I need to find the phone. So he finds the phone, he pulls it out, and walks away with it. Now the question is, did the movement of these attendants make the phone call? Or did my former boss, because he's known to be not happy man, make the phone call because he wanted them to stop touching him? Now that's the question for the ages. What do you think?
Thanks, Mac. Never underestimate the power of being bitter. It's widely known that spite and revenge keeps many people alive, and I have no doubt that it's a good enough reason to reach out from the other side as well. But I actually shared this call tonight because it reminded me of a story I heard just the other day. But let me back up a bit first. It may come as no surprise, but this show shares a lot of fans with the WWE. If I'm honest, the paranormal in general does. So this story might resonate with more than a few of you. Now, in my downtime, I was surfing Instagram, and I saw a story about one of the most infamous of wrestlers, Hulk Hogan, talking about his friend and fellow wrestler, Roddy Piper, reaching out to him after his death. Now, Delaney and I were discussing this story, and she was able to dig up a clip of the Hulkster himself, discussing this odd and touching occurrence, an occurrence that he experienced just hours after Piper's death. Here is that clip courtesy of the A&E documentary, Roddy Piper, the WWE's greatest villain.
You know, the news came that he'd passed away, you know. And I felt like I got shot in the chest with a cannon, you know. And it kind of like knocked me off track for a couple of days. And then all of a sudden I get this voice message. It was really weird because either my phone was messed up. Sometimes you'll get a text message at that night when it was sent to you in the morning.
I saw the light. I'm walking with Jesus today, my brother. Walking with Jesus, loving you and praying for you.
It really spooked me out, like, alien thing, you know, like Close Encounters is crazy to get a voice message from somebody after they passed away. And especially for him to say, I'm loving you and walking with Jesus, my brother. Just loving you and walking with Jesus. I was like, wow. Totally screwed me up.
Now the full documentary is up for free on YouTube. There's a link in the show notes. So now we're left asking the same questions that Mac was. Is this some freak occurrence where numbers were accidentally dialed? Or was it a voicemail that was stuck in limbo? Or are these both examples of contact from the other side? Now I'll let you be the judge. But let me tell you, brother, that there's no shortage of personal accounts that sound exactly like both Max and the Hulksters. So if it is some sort of accident that resulted in the phenomena, maybe it's not as rare as we were led to believe. Thank you again, Mac, for sharing the entry.
Animal. And if 1 year does...
Thank you. So anyways,
Now, who's up for something weird? I think this next one from Kendra, up in Canada, fits that description to a T.
Hey Derek, my name's Kendra. I'm 20 years old. I just wanted to call in about a time, I want to say I was 6 or 7. I lived in Wheatley, Ontario at this time on a farm. I want to say our closest neighbor was about 4-minute drive away, and we were kind of on the corner of a dirt road and a paved road. So at the end of this dirt road, the corner was called Devil's Corner, as many of us knew it, or many different names as it was called, because it was a very sharp corner, and I want to say if you're going about 80 and you didn't know the road, you most times would get into a crash there. But this is actually my mom's story. At the time, my mom was seeing a guy who had 3 kids, and my mom has me and my sister. So there was 5 kids home, including me, and at this time, my mom's boyfriend was gone away for work. It was later at night. She was coming home from, I want to say, the feed store or something. But she was taking this dirt road, and she had saw what kind of looked like somebody walking down the dirt road. And mind you, there's no street lamps. There's just pretty much the moon and stars at this point to light everything up. And our dog, Rocky, started losing his mind as my mom was getting closer. He was shaking, he was growling, he was barking, he was, as my mom told me, almost breaking the window trying to get at this person. And my mom ended up getting him into the back seat and rolled down her window and went to holler to see if he was okay. But when she got closer, she could see that this man was covered in blood, had ripped clothes. I think he was missing a shoe. And there was only one farm on this road. And it was our good friends who, they had horses and stuff, but his name was Wes. And so she was wondering why this gentleman wouldn't have gone and knocked on Wes's door if he needed help. But anyways, my mom went, she rolled down her window, she hollered if he needed help, and when she said this guy turned around and looked at him, it's almost like he had white eyes, and then he was almost see-through. Like she said she could see the corn through him. Anyways, she ended up booking it home and locking the front door, and at that time we had a shotgun by our front door just because we did have a known cougar to be in our area, and with 5 young kids and a whole bunch of animals, she just didn't want to risk it. Anyways, she ended up talking to Wes about this because it was something that's on her mind. We still talk about it, God, almost 15 years later. Anyways, Wes ended up saying it was a gentleman who ended up crashing way back when. But I just wanted to call in and let you know. Thanks, Derek. Bye.
Thanks for calling in, Kendra. That is quite unsettling. Now, when I was pretty young, my aunt, who herself was only in her early 20s at the time, told anyone that would listen that she saw a man covered in blood run at her car from a ditch along the side of the road. Frightened, she sped off and told my grandfather. who was the chief of police at the time. But he didn't find anything, and to this day the mystery goes unsolved. Now maybe, like with Kendra's mother's mystery man, it was simply a guy in a car accident. But even if that's the case, her story and the mental image has never left my mind. So thank you again, Kendra, for jogging that memory, I think. Well then, folks, that brings us to tonight's closer. And boy, do I have something special reserved for you. Without further fanfare, please welcome Aiden from Texas to tonight's program.
Hey Derek, my name is Aiden, and this story happened to me in Southwest Arkansas. So something that some of my friends and I used to do for the past year, but we stopped about 2 months ago, was train hopping, which gets a pretty bad stigma. Obviously, it's kind of dangerous and possibly not technically legal, but we recently stopped doing it because it's something that happened this most recent time. This was about 2 or 3 months ago, and we got on a train in our town in Texas, and the train went north for a bit and then eventually turned east towards Arkansas. And when you get on a train, especially train hopping, you really have no idea where it's going. And so, we had a week or so scheduled out to do this. And so the train went east to Arkansas, and we crossed the Arkansas border at about 11 o'clock at night. And the train car, it was me and 3 friends. The train car we had gotten was one without a roof. It looked kind of like a big dumpster where it had 4 walls and no roof. And this was really good because you could stand and look out. But also at night, you could just lay down and the wind wouldn't be getting to you, and you would just be laying there at night sleeping. So it was about 11 o'clock at night that we crossed the border, and about 1 o'clock at night, all 4 of us were laying there trying to sleep. And I'm pretty sure 3 of my friends were asleep, but I was awake and I was laying there looking at the stars. And when you're on a train, the train has a rhythm, and every train kind of has a different rhythm. They're pretty similar, but depends on how fast it's going, like the mechanical slight differences of each train. But you get used to the rhythm of your train, like the constant, like it's like a rhythm. So I was laying there listening to the rhythm of it with my head on the metal, so like I could really hear it. And all of a sudden I just kind of started hearing something else, like along with the rhythm, and I couldn't really even hear what it was. All I could hear was that the rhythm had changed, and this change, it came about kind of suddenly. So I was laying there and I didn't think too much of it, and I just kind of thought we had like hit something or were dragging something, or some of the cargo had shifted, although like this train was mostly empty. So I was just listening to this, and I was trying to figure out what it was as it kept going, as the noise kept going. And one thing about trains is a lot of train tracks are one way, or like there's just one train track. And so if you're going one direction and there's a train coming right at you from the other direction, one of the trains has to get off and stop and pull over, because they have little spots to do this where you can pull over and the other train goes past you, and then you can keep going. This happens a lot when you're train hopping, that it just kind of stops, and it had happened before. So we were laying here, and I was listening to this noise, and the train started to slow down, and we were in the middle of nowhere, so I was figuring it was just another one of these common, like, stops. Usually they're about, 1 to 3 hours, and they're in the middle of absolutely nowhere. So this train started to slow down to stop, and I could instantly, tell that this noise wasn't coming from the train. It wasn't part of the actual train mechanics, because as the train was slowing down and stopping, and the rhythm of the train was, slowing down as it was slowly stopping, this noise that I had been hearing stayed the same volume and the same speed, I guess, but it wasn't changing along with the train. And I was like, that's weird. Normally, if we weren't on a moving train, I would think this was like something in a field or something. But since I'd been hearing it for quite a while, I knew it was on the train. And as we slowed down, I started to be able to tell what the noise was. It was like this deep wailing, like somebody was crying. but it was like just so much anguish, and like I don't really know how to describe it. I know you like to have examples to hear. So the best thing that I can say it was like was the movie Midsummer, and there's a scene where like the main girl is like crying these deep anguish wails, and it kind of sounded like that, just so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. So it was these loud noises, and I could tell it was coming from like a couple cars in front of us, and I can't quite remember if I woke my friends up or if they woke up on their own because of it and because the train was stopping. But we were all listening to it, just frozen, like, what on earth is this? And we started like whispering. We were like, it couldn't be an animal, because an animal wouldn't be on the train, and if there was an animal on the train, it would have like jumped off or by now, because the train wasn't moving. We were thinking maybe it could have been a person that was also on the train that had gotten like seriously injured, but that just didn't seem right. Nothing really was making sense on what this noise could have been. And it was definitely not mechanical, because obviously the train was stopped and it sounded like somebody wailing and crying. So after about 10 to 15 minutes of listening to this with the train stopped, I really wanted to kind of find out what it was, especially if maybe it was a person. And I was, I guess you could say, more attached to the sound just because I'd been hearing it this whole time. And so we were already kind of ballsy, I guess, doing train hopping. So going to find out what this wasn't like a huge step in courage, I guess. So we climbed over the edge of our train car and started walking along the tracks towards the noise. And I was in front, and there's like the wooden planks, and we were walking on those. And I kind of pointed and was like, hey, don't step on the rocks, because, you know, that makes quite a bit of noise. So walk on the wooden planks. And we were holding onto the train, and there were no lights. It was dark. It was like a field or a forest or something like that, but there were no houses, no lights, really anything. And we were just feeling our way. And as we got closer, like, I could see what car it was coming from. And this was a train car that had just two walls, one on either end. And usually they'd put like planks of wood or like logs or something. And so I could tell as I got closer to this car, I could see one of the walls of the ends of the train, and there was the wall closest to me. And I could tell it was kind of behind this wall that this noise was coming from. And we got closer to it until it was just the next car. And it was just same volume, same intensity, same loudness, just this wailing. And I had been a little creeped out this whole time, but I was pretty scared, and my friends were probably too. But I think it was definitely, if I was alone, I would have never checked it out. But it was good that we had some friends, and we all kind of, you know, had already been through some scary stuff with train hopping. So we were a good team to do this. I was in the front, and I kind of moved forward enough to where all I had to do was just move my head around the wall and see what it was. Like, I could tell it was like 6-7 feet just around that corner. And I can't remember how long I sat there waiting, like trying to get the courage to just literally just move my head, move my eyes around and look and see what it was. I was expecting kind of like a lady crying. It sounded like a female voice. I'll say that. And I was fully expecting something to be there, a human or something. I had no idea what it was. And so I really quickly, after a second getting the courage up, I just moved my head around this wall to see what it was, to see on this car. And the very second that my eyes went around the corner, just the absolute millisecond that I would have been able to see it, the noise just absolutely stopped. Like dead silent, mid-wail, just completely stopped. And there was nothing there. Nothing at all. The car was completely empty. And that terrified all of us more than anything. Just complete silence. And when we were being quiet and out there was quiet, the silence was just deafening. And we were like, what was making this noise? Where was it? It's hard to explain, but you can tell like where a sound is coming from. And it wasn't coming from behind the other side of the train. It wasn't coming from under the train. It was coming from on that car. And I was so close to it that I could tell like it's coming from right next to me. The moment I turned my head around the corner, completely silent. I still have no idea what it was. None of us have any clue what that could have been. We got our tails over to our car as quickly as we could, got in, and we made it, through the night and got off, and really just decided to quit train hopping for good. Our parents had been pushing that on us for quite a while, but this was kind of the final straw of just something so strange and weird. I know that this story might not sound completely believable. I do have videos from that night of us getting on the train, being on that car, so I can send those over along with this, just a little bit of evidence, I guess. We didn't video that noise because we didn't even think terribly much of it and didn't even think to video. So sorry about that, but I hope maybe somebody else has heard this sort of thing, or I don't really know if you have an idea what it could be, because we certainly don't, and we've been thinking about it for quite a while. But I thought I'd call in. Been listening for about a month now, really enjoying it. So thanks for the podcast, and hope you can use this. Have a good one.
Thank you, Aiden. That is quite the tale. And I'm glad to hear that you've given up the rails. Several seasons ago, I told a story of an old friend I had in LA that used to ride the rails all over the West, who was accidentally locked in a train car in 120-degree heat, and he nearly died. Also, I'm pretty sure it's illegal everywhere, if they catch you. But I'm not a lawyer, and this isn't a law podcast. This is a podcast about the strange and the unusual, and I think that perfectly describes this bizarre account. But I'm not a train engineer either, so I really can't sit here and tell you that the sound was a stuck hydraulic cylinder releasing, or that the moisture drain on the air reservoirs were full and pressure was building up. I don't even know what either of those things mean. But I do know about ghosts and ghost stories. And this part of Arkansas has one hell of a tale. It's a ghost, or a ghost light rather, that's said to haunt a section of railroad track in southwest Arkansas. A light locals know as the Gurdon Light.
So what is this mysterious light? Gurdon local Billy Tarpley says that is a question that has plagued many for years.
It's always in a place that there's no other electricity around. It shows up when it chooses to show up, and when it chooses for you to see it, then you see it. And so it's been that way for many, many years.
Thompson says the first theory has to do with the murder of Will McLean, who was bludgeoned to death by one of his railroad workers, Louis McBride. McBride later confessed to the murder and was executed in 1932.
Documentation through the local paper, I think the Gurdon paper, said that in it didn't give the date, somewhere in 1932, people reporting a light on the track.
The legend was that the light is the man out there with a lantern, the ghost of Mr. McLean, looking for his head, looking for that area.
Now that clip courtesy of KATV, ABC News 7, out of Little Rock, and perfectly illustrates the local point of view considering the light. Now it seems they take it pretty seriously down that way, and for good reason. If you saw this thing, you'd probably be freaked out too. Now I first learned of this legend in my early teens via another legend, old Bobby Stack and the crew over at Unsolved Mysteries. Now here's a brief clip from that coverage, which aired all the way back in December of 1994.
One of the earliest sightings is one of the most memorable. As a train approached town, an elderly conductor named John stepped onto the back of the caboose and was startled by what he saw.
They say that John went out on the back platform to investigate, and the light was real far off and kind of faint, but it seemed to be traveling the same speed they were. And then all of a sudden it just shot up, and he's just like paralyzed and just hanging on to the grab iron and just transfixed, staring right into the light.
According to John, the light followed the train for more than a mile. Finally, it veered off in the direction of the cemetery. Ever since, looking for the Gurdon Light has become something of a local pastime.
And to think that this legend isn't even 100 years old yet. It's a bit wild to know that the origins are so recent. Relative to other ghost stories, that is. But back to Aiden's entry. Now I suppose the Gurdon Light has little to do with the strange experience Aiden and his friends had that evening. But I do have a suspicion that in the event that it wasn't something supernatural they encountered, that a few listeners out there that are also train aficionados will likely tell us what could have been making that sound on an idling train. Now, I'll be sure to circle back should I receive any useful information. But if I don't, well, that just might mean that whatever this was, it wasn't from this earthly realm. Man, I'm a sucker for a good train tale. Oh, and I actually haven't seen the film that Aiden references, Midsummer, though it is on my radar, and Sarah has been bugging me for years to watch it. But I have actually linked to a clip that I believe he is referring to, if you'd like to hear an example of what he thought it sounded like. And spoiler alert, it doesn't sound very good. I certainly could not imagine hearing that on a darkened train in the middle of the Arkansas forest. But we thank you, Aiden, for not only calling in, but for being brave enough to investigate and try to get to the bottom of whatever that sound was. That's the way you do it. So thank you again for calling in. Now, folks, that's going to do it for the evening. Thank you all, as usual, for tuning in. It's always a pleasure to share the digital airwaves with you. Now, I'll be back next week with a brand new installment. But of course, don't forget about the secret entry immediately following the show's outro. Now, Monsters Among Us is written and produced by me, Derek Hayes. Copyright Red Crow Media. Additional support is provided by Sarah Carter Hayes and Delaney Bowers. All media used in this production is done so under the protection of fair use. Please follow us on social media, over on YouTube, or give us a rate and review wherever that sort of thing is possible. Oh, and I was honored to be a special guest on Woo Woo with Rachel Dratch. That episode dropped just yesterday, so find it wherever you get your podcasts, or I bet we have a link up in the show notes. It was a blast hanging out with Rachel and Irene, and I think you're really going to enjoy the episode. Finally, tonight's score was provided by Iron Cthulhu Apocalypse, Co.ag Music, and Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Thank you all once again for stopping by. Do me a solid and keep it spooky out there. And while you're at it, have a good night.
And its own receipt. I don't always it's people. And people received it not.
You know, a couple of seasons ago, I tried to put a kibosh on the secret entry. For a few reasons, really. There's a significant drop-off of listenership at the outro, which is not desirable. Sometimes it's a challenge, timing-wise, just so we get the ad breaks at the correct time. And sometimes it's hard to find just the right call, the strangest of the strange and the weirdest of the weird, or at least my definition of the words. And you know, I've done that yet again with tonight's clandestine phone call. I won't spoil anything, but get a load of this unexplainable occurrence from Alice in Colorado.
Hi, I'm Alice from Colorado. This is a glitch in the Matrix story. I'm an older lady, and I've had quite a few paranormal experiences over the years, but this one happened when I was living in San Antonio, Texas. It was back in 1975 when my then husband and I and our 2-year-old son were with my husband's coworker, his wife, and their 2-year-old son, and we were all in their car. I forget where we were going, but it was nice weather out, so lots of times we'd go for a drive together. Anyway, we were on the road, and I remembered the light turned green, so Don, my husband's coworker, drove forwards, and as we were nearing the middle of the intersection, we heard a revving car engine speeding towards us, coming straight towards the left side and middle of our car. It came so fast that we didn't even have time to brace for an impact because the other car was just about a foot away from hitting us. And in the blink of an eye, that car was on the other side of our car, on the right-hand side, about 2 car lengths away, speeding off down the road. We were all shaken, and Don finished driving through the intersection and pulled over, and we all discussed what we'd experienced, and we all agreed that it was either a miracle or something really weird. Anyway, that's all of my story. Thanks for everything you do, Derek. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Alice. You know, I hear stories and rumors that we live in some sort of simulation, that none of this is really real. Just like the film The Matrix, which is why Alice referred to her occurrence as a quote-unquote glitch in the Matrix. It happens often enough that it has its own terminology. Now, of course, there's nothing I can do to explain this story away, so I won't even bother guessing. But I can say that I am just as perplexed as Alice is, but I love the story for sure. So thank you again, Alice, for making the phone call. Now, folks, don't go anywhere just yet. Give me 20-some seconds to tell you how you can get days worth of additional MAU content absolutely free. Just visit patreon.com, search for Monsters Among Us, and take advantage of that free trial. Now, of course, if you like what you hear, and you truly appreciate all the additional content and the work that goes into it, maybe stick around for a month or two. Show your support the easy way. After all, you're already signed up at this point. It's over at the Beyond that you get to hear rebuttals to past calls, additional information from previous entries. In fact, just last week we heard from Olivia, Alex's wife from 1626, who believes she might have been abducted by aliens. And we also share never-before-heard calls, like this one, from an anonymous caller out of the Golden State of California.
Hi, I'd like to remain anonymous, but I am someone who's seen stuff since I was very small. I've been all over the world, seen all sorts of interesting things, but I wanted to call about the shadow people request you sent out of people who have made contact with shadow people. I have. It wasn't really a choice, but I was on San Francisco BART. I'm mostly from the Bay Area, and I have seen many types of shadow